The morning sky above New Haven Colony erupted in red, the warning lights flashing in urgent synchrony. Captain Jake Morrison stood atop the command tower, watching his soldiers scramble into their battle positions. His hands trembled as he clutched the radio. Earth Command's message had been crystal clear and utterly terrifying. The Krillians had deployed their deadliest weapon. He turned to his lieutenant, Sam Walker. "They call it Vexthar," Jake said, his voice taut with tension, "and it's never lost a fight." Sam raised his binoculars, scanning the horizon. Beyond the colony walls, the field stretched empty, the stillness almost unnerving. "How big is it?" Sam asked, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his concern. Jake hesitated, then answered. 12 feet tall, weighs as much as a transport ship. It's a nightmare made flesh, built from the worst predators they've harvested from across a dozen worlds. Jake wiped the sweat beading on his brow, his voice dropping even lower. And that's not even the worst part. The ground suddenly quaked beneath their feet. Panic spread like wildfire as birds bolted from the forests, and every living creature on New Haven seemed to sense the impending doom. The colony's alarm system shrieked a chorus of shrill warnings. Dr. Alan Cross hurried up the tower's stairs, his lab coat stained and his glasses askew, as if he had just run through a storm. "Captain Morrison," he panted, breathless from the climb. "I've been going over the reports from the other colonies. This creature, it's like nothing we've ever faced." Jake turned to him, brows furrowing. "What are you saying, Doc?" Cross's face was pale, his voice grave. "This thing learns from every fight. Each time it kills, it becomes smarter. It remembers what works against it. It understands our tactics, how we fight. By now, it probably knows more about warfare than most of our generals." A deafening roar echoed across the landscape, so loud that the windows in nearby buildings trembled and cracked. The sound churned through the colony like an omen, making even the bravest soldiers falter. Children began to cry, their terrified wails mingling with the rising chaos. "There!" Sam pointed to the tree line, his voice hoarse with fear. "It's coming." The trees began to fall, one by one, uprooted as though they were paper, not wood. Something immense was pushing its way through the forest, coming straight toward them. And then they saw it. Vexthar emerged from the shadow of the woods, stepping into the harsh morning light. It was a living nightmare, its form a grotesque blend of strength and terror. Its body was covered in dark, glistening scales that looked like impenetrable armor. Each scale was as large as a dinner plate. Its eyes glowed like burning embers, malevolent and unblinking. For powerful legs drove its massive bulk forward with unnerving speed. "Sweet stars," Sam whispered under his breath, unable to tear his eyes away from the creature. "Those claws." Vexthar's claws, each one as long as a sword, scraped the ground, gouging deep ruts into the earth with every step. Its tail, thick as a tree trunk and lined with sharp, jagged spikes, lashed through the air. Embedded into its flesh were cybernetic enhancements. Metal parts fused into its body, making it a living weapon. Jake's voice cut through the tense silence. "All units, open fire." 50 plasma rifles fired in unison, the crackling energy beams streaking toward the creature. The shots hit Vexthar's armor like scales and bounced off, scattering like raindrops. The beast didn't even flinch. It regarded the humans before it with a detached, almost amused indifference. Its massive head swiveled toward the main gate, its mouth opening to reveal rows of jagged teeth, each one larger than a man's hand. Then it roared again. This time, several soldiers dropped their weapons, their legs failing them in terror. "Fall back to secondary positions." Jake shouted into the radio, but Vexthar was already on the move. Faster than anything that size should have been able to move, it closed the distance to the outer wall in mere moments. Rather than climbing over or going around, it barreled through the stone wall with a ferocity that sent blocks flying like toys. Sergeant Pete Martinez was manning the gate's heavy gun when a wall exploded. The massive weapon, capable of obliterating tanks, fired a concentrated blast directly at Vexthar's chest. The explosion should have decimated anything in its path, but it hit the creature squarely and did nothing. Vexthar merely turned its gaze toward Pete, its expression unreadable. Then, with one swift, sweeping motion of its colossal claw, it obliterated Pete and his gun in a storm of sparks and shrapnel. "This isn't working," Dr. Cross said, his face ashen, dread seeping into his voice. "Our weapons, nothing's working." As the battle raged on, Vexthar plowed deeper into the colony, seemingly studying the defenses with a terrifying, methodical precision. When a squad of soldiers tried to flank it, the creature reacted instantly. It spun, its spiked tail swinging wide, impaling the soldiers in one brutal motion. Jake felt a chilling realization gnaw at him. "It's not just strong, it's intelligent. Look at it," he muttered. "It's using tactics, our tactics." The creature moved with purpose, staying in cover, striking the strongest positions first to break their resolve. It attacked like it had studied human warfare for years. "We need to evacuate the civilians," Sam said, his voice tight. Inside the underground shelters, families huddled in fearful silence. The distant sounds of the battle rumbled through the thick concrete walls. Kate Bennett clutched her 8-year-old daughter, Lucy, close to her chest. "Mommy, what's that noise?" Lucy asked, her voice small, trembling with fear. Her favorite stuffed dog, a small brown toy, was clutched in her tiny arms. "Just thunder, sweetheart," Kate lied, her heart heavy with the weight of the deception. She couldn't bring herself to tell Lucy the truth, that a monster was tearing their home apart. Around them, other families clung to each other, trying to keep their children calm. Mr. Frank Davies, the elderly neighbor, sat with his wife, his hand in hers. Young parents tried to hush their babies, but the air was thick with tension. Every explosion above caused the lights to flicker, each thundering boom making the shelter's occupants jump and hold each other tighter. Back above ground, Vexthar had reached the second line of defense. It paused, as though studying the layout of the guns and barricades, its glowing red eyes scanning the battlefield like a predator sizing up its prey. "It's planning something," Jake muttered into his radio. "All units, stay alert. Prepare for anything." Then, in a blur of motion, the creature charged left, only to pivot right with a sudden, deadly spin. The soldiers, caught completely off guard, had no time to adjust. Guns pointed in the wrong direction, they were overwhelmed in seconds. The beast's claws tore through their armor like paper, and its teeth crushed both weapons and bone alike. Dr. Alan Cross continued to jot down notes, his focus unwavering, even as death drew closer with every passing moment. "Captain," he called out, his voice tinged with grim realization, "I think I finally understand what we're dealing with. This isn't just a weapon. It's a learning machine. Every move we make, every tactic we employ, teaches it something new." Jake looked over at him, his expression hardening. "Then how do we fight something that learns from our mistakes?" Cross didn't answer immediately. The battle raged on, and for the next 3 hours, every strategy, every attack was futile. Every trap set by the soldiers was seen through and expertly avoided. Vexthar moved through their defenses as if they were nothing but shadows, leaving destruction in its wake. By noon, the once proud fighting force of New Haven had been decimated. Most of the soldiers were either dead or wounded, and the few survivors had retreated to the very heart of the colony. Captain Morrison surveyed the remaining soldiers. Only 20 men stood beside him now, a mere fraction of the 200 who had started the battle. "Sir," Sam Walker's voice broke the silence, fatigued and laced with fear. It stopped moving. The men turned toward the main plaza, their gazes fixed on the creature. Vexthar stood in the midst of the wrecked town square, motionless. Its massive head was lifted high, its burning red eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something. "What's it doing?" one of the soldiers murmured. Dr. Cross adjusted his crooked glasses, his eyes narrowing. "I think it's listening." His voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried weight. The cybernetic implants in its ears must be capable of hearing frequencies we can't even detect. Vexthar's head slowly turned, its gaze locking onto the underground shelter where the civilians were hiding. Its mouth opened, revealing its jagged, razor-sharp teeth, gleaming like shards of broken glass in the daylight. "Oh no," Kate Bennett whispered from the shelter below. Her heart skipped a beat as she heard the thundering footsteps above them, each step shaking the dust from the ceiling. Lucy, her 8-year-old daughter, looked up from her toy, her innocent face full of confusion. "Mommy, is there a big dog up there?" The question hit like a cold wave. Kate felt the world shift beneath her feet. If only it were just a big dog. Up above, Vexthar had found exactly what it was looking for. Captain Morrison gathered his remaining men in the crumbling town hall, their faces smeared with dirt and fear. The soldiers, though battle-worn, still held their weapons firmly in hand, ready for what was to come. "Listen up," Jake said, his voice steady, though the weight of the situation threatened to crack his resolve. "That thing knows where the civilians are hiding. With a last line of defense, we stand between it and innocent families." Sergeant Danny Foster, one of the few squad leaders still alive, stepped forward, his face grim. "Captain, our weapons can't even scratch that thing. How are we supposed to stop it?" Jake met the eyes of each soldier around him. These were men who had followed him into hell for 3 years of brutal war against the Krillians. They deserved honesty. "Maybe we can't stop it," Jake admitted, his voice low, "but we can slow it down. We can buy the evacuation teams more time." Through the shattered windows, they could see Vexthar moving slowly toward the entrance of the underground shelter. It moved like a predator, savoring every moment, as if it were playing with its prey. Lieutenant Sam Walker's voice crackled through the radio, his words tight with urgency. "Transport ships are 15 minutes out," he reported. "But the shelter doors won't hold that long." Vexthar stopped directly above the shelter entrance, its enormous head lowering to gaze down at the reinforced metal doors. Steam billowed from its nostrils with each breath it took. Dr. Cross, still taking notes despite the growing sense of impending doom, muttered to himself, "It's scanning the doors. Those cybernetic implants, probably giving it a detailed map of the shelter's layout." In the shelter below, the families huddled together, pressing against the back walls. The ceiling trembled with the creature's massive footsteps. Children cried quietly while their parents tried to comfort them. Every ear in the shelter strained to hear the scraping sound of Vexthar's claws dragging across the metal above. Kate held Lucy tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. The lights flickered again, casting the room into brief darkness before they snapped back to life. Lucy, still clutching her stuffed dog, seemed strangely calm. "Don't be scared, buddy," Lucy whispered to her toy, her words innocent and naive. "Sometimes big animals seem mean when they're really just lonely." Old Mrs. Helen Baker, who had lived on New Haven for decades, shook her head sadly. "That's no animal, child. That's a monster." Lucy's response was quiet but resolute as she hugged her stuffed dog closer. "Daddy always said, there's no such thing as a mean animal, just scared ones." Above them, Vexthar raised one enormous claw and brought it down with terrifying force on the shelter door. The reinforced metal, designed to withstand orbital bombardment, cracked like eggshells under the onslaught. "Now!" Captain Morrison shouted. His voice rang out, a rallying cry as his remaining soldiers opened fire. Plasma bolts, explosive rounds, and energy beams collided with the beast in a furious salvo. It was the largest coordinated assault they could manage with so few men. Vexthar turned toward them, its expression unchanged. If anything, it seemed mildly annoyed. The weapons that should have obliterated anything in their path barely left a mark on its thick, armored scales. The creature's mouth opened in what could only be described as a grotesque smile. Its cybernetic implants flickered, glowing brighter as they processed the attack. In the blink of an eye, Vexthar had analyzed every weapon's position, every trajectory, and in that moment, it moved like lightning. The first wave of soldiers didn't even have time to react before massive claws swept through them. Sergeant Foster dubbed behind cover, but Vexthar's tail lashed out, catching him midair. "Spread out," Jake yelled, desperation rising in his voice. "Don't let it take us all at once." But it was too late. Vexthar had already adapted, its movements an eerie mirror of their tactics. Every strategy they tried, it countered flawlessly. Private Bobby Chun fired a rocket from the roof of a nearby building, the missile streaking toward the creature. The blast hit Vexthar's shoulder, erupting in a ball of flame. For a fleeting moment, Jake dared to hope they had finally wounded it. The smoke cleared to reveal Vexthar standing exactly where it had been, unscathed. The explosion had done nothing. Vexthar turned its glowing eyes toward Bobby, its gaze locking onto his position with eerie precision. In an instant, the building Bobby had been hiding in began to crumble, collapsing under the creature's attack. With surgical accuracy, it struck the support beams, bringing the entire structure down without even glancing in the direction of the other soldiers. Dr. Cross spoke rapidly into his recorder, his voice tinged with panic. The learning process is accelerating. It's no longer just remembering our tactics. It's predicting them. Every battle, every engagement, makes it exponentially more dangerous. Lieutenant Walker, with only 6 soldiers left, attempted a desperate flanking maneuver. They split into 2 groups, hoping to outsmart the beast, to confuse it, but Vexthar was anything but confused. With a swift, fluid motion, it spun on its massive frame, its spiked tail lashing out to sweep one group aside while its claws tore through the other. The attack was seamless, perfectly timed, and brutally efficient. "This isn't working," Sam gasped, crawling behind a pile of rubble, blood trickling down his face from a deep gash. "It's like fighting a machine, a computer that knows every move we're going to make." Jake looked around at his remaining soldiers. Only 5 men were left. They had given everything they had, but it was nowhere near enough. The creatures stood amid the fallen bodies of their comrades, unharmed, unfazed. Below in the shelter, the sound of the metal doors finally breaking under the relentless assault of Vexthar's claws echoed through the chambers. A wave of screams rose from the civilians as daylight flooded into the underground hideout. Vexthar's massive head appeared in the opening, its red eyes sweeping over the terrified families like searchlights. Men pushed their wives and children behind them, though they all knew it was futile. "Run," someone shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "To the back tunnels." Chaos erupted as families surged toward the emergency exits, but in the panic, many became separated. Parents lost track of their children, the darkness and fear swallowing them whole. Kate Bennett was swept along with the frantic crowd, but her grip on Lucy slipped. "Lucy!" she screamed, but the current of terrified bodies carried her away from her daughter. Lucy, meanwhile, found herself alone in a side tunnel that led toward the maintenance areas of the colony. She wasn't crying like the other children. Instead, she looked back toward the main chamber where the creature had tried, unsuccessfully, to squeeze its bulk through the shelter's entrance. "He's too big for the door," Lucy said, speaking to her stuffed dog, Buddy, as though she were explaining the creature's behavior. "That's why he's angry. He can't fit." Above ground, Vexthar gave up on trying to squeeze through the shelter entrance. Instead, it tore at the metal, ripping it apart with its claws, widening the hole with brutal efficiency. Captain Morrison, now leading only 4 soldiers, made one last desperate attempt to save the civilians. With a rallying cry, they charged straight toward the beast, unleashing everything they had left. "For New Haven!" Jake shouted. Vexthar barely acknowledged them. With one casual swipe of its colossal paw, it sent all 5 men flying through the air like ragdolls. Jake collided hard with a concrete wall, crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. His rifle snapped in half beside him. The creature turned back to its work on the shelter, its singular focus unbroken. The opening it was creating was almost wide enough for it to step through and finish what it had started. Dr. Cross, bleeding from a dozen cuts, crawled closer, trying to get a better look at the creature. His voice trembled as he spoke into his recorder. "It's evolving," he whispered, his words laden with horror. "The implants aren't just helping it fight. They're changing it. It's rewriting its brain patterns in real time. It's becoming something new, something far more dangerous than the Krillians ever intended." In the maintenance tunnel, Lucy continued her solitary walk, her stuffed dog pressed tightly against her chest. The sounds of screaming and panicked footsteps behind her were growing quieter. Lucy wasn't afraid. She was curious. "I wonder what that big animal wants," she said to Buddy. "Maybe he's lost like us." The tunnel led upward toward the surface, toward the central plaza. Lucy had explored these passages before when her father worked on the colony's water systems. She knew they would bring her out near the heart of New Haven, where everything had begun. Behind her, the sounds of terror continued as Vexthar forced its massive body through the shelter entrance. Its cybernetic implants glowed brighter, scanning the underground chambers, tracking the heat signatures of the fleeing civilians. Kate, in the midst of the panicked crowd, was still desperately searching for her daughter. "Lucy," she called again and again, her voice breaking with each cry. "Lucy, where are you?" "She went toward the maintenance area," said Mr. Frank Davies, the elderly neighbor who had lived next door to them for years. "She went the wrong way." Kate's heart seemed to stop. The maintenance tunnels led directly to the surface, straight into the path of the monster that had come to destroy their world. Up in the ruined command center, Jake Morrison, barely clinging to life, tried to push himself upright, but his broken left arm and the blood covering his face made it impossible. Through the cracked windows, he watched as Vexthar's massive form disappeared into the shelter entrance. "The civilians," he whispered, his voice filled with despair. Lieutenant Sam Walker, who had barely managed to stay conscious, reached weakly for his radio, but it slipped from his hand. Dr. Alan Cross had found a hidden spot in the medical center, his eyes wide with fear as he tried to comprehend what he was witnessing. Jake's hands trembled as he peered through his binoculars, watching the creature's movements with growing unease. "The beast is being careful now," he murmured into his recorder. "It's moving slowly through the shelter, deliberately avoiding bringing the ceiling down on itself. It's learning patience. It understands that rushing could collapse the tunnels and trap its prey." His voice grew quieter, filled with a chilling realization. It's developing hunting instincts beyond its original programming. Meanwhile, Lucy had reached the end of the maintenance tunnel. A metal ladder led up to a hatch that opened to the surface. With the same careful precision her father had taught her during their explorations of the colony, she began to climb. The hatch swung open, revealing the central plaza in the harsh light of day. Lucy stepped out into the devastation. Broken concrete and twisted metal littered the plaza, remnants of the battle that had torn the colony apart. Her small face clouded with sadness as she took in the damage. "Someone made a really big mess," she said softly to Buddy, her stuffed dog. "Daddy's going to be upset when he sees this." Lucy's father, who had been away on a supply mission to the outer settlements, had no idea that his home was being destroyed or that his little girl was walking into such deadly danger. The 8-year-old girl walked across the plaza, carefully stepping around debris. She had lived on New Haven her whole life, but she had never seen the town square like this. Broken, scarred, unrecognizable. "Hello," she called out, her voice small and uncertain. "Is anyone here? I'm looking for my mommy." Her voice echoed off the ruined buildings, and in the distance, she could hear the sounds of destruction coming from the shelter. Something large was moving down there, creating an awful noise. Back in the underground chambers, Vexthar moved through the tunnels like a living nightmare. Its massive body barely fit through the narrow passages, but it squeezed its way forward with relentless determination. The creature's red eyes glowed menacingly in the dark as it hunted. Families huddled together in the deepest parts of the shelter system. Parents held their children tight, urging them to remain silent. Everyone knew that even the slightest sound could lead the monster straight to them. Kate Bennett was beside herself with worry. She had searched every tunnel and chamber she could reach, but Lucy was nowhere to be found. Other parents tried to help her, but the beast was drawing closer by the second. "She must have gone to the surface," Kate whispered, her voice breaking. "My little girl is up there, alone with that thing." Helen Baker, the elderly neighbor, placed a hand on Kate's shoulder, her expression heavy with sorrow. "We can't help her from down here. All we can do is pray." Above ground, Lucy continued her slow cautious walk through the plaza. She wasn't trying to find her mother anymore. Something else had caught her attention. She heard heavy breathing coming from one of the nearby damaged buildings. "Is someone hurt?" she asked, stepping toward the sound. "Do you need help?" The breathing grew louder, sounding like a very large animal, tired and perhaps in distress. Lucy had heard similar noises from the colony's livestock when they were frightened or agitated. She rounded the corner of a broken wall, and there it was, Vexthar. The creature was stuck, its enormous body wedged halfway through the shelter's entrance, struggling to free itself. It had been so eager to pursue its prey that it had pushed too far into the tunnel system, and now its broad shoulders were caught in the opening. It couldn't pull itself out. Lucy tilted her head, studying the situation with a quiet curiosity. She'd seen animals get stuck before. Once a neighbor's cow had gotten its head trapped in a fence, and another time, a wild pig had been caught under a fallen tree. "Oh, you poor thing," Lucy murmured softly. "You're stuck, aren't you?" Vexthar's massive head turned toward her at the sound of her voice. Its burning red eyes locked onto the small human child, standing just 20 feet away. The creature's cybernetic processors buzzed with activity, trying to analyze this new situation. Child. Human. No weapons. No fear scent. No aggressive posture. The data didn't match any of its programmed response patterns. Lucy wasn't afraid. She didn't understand the true danger in front of her. To her young mind, this was just a very large, very strange animal that needed help. She had spent her whole life around animals on the frontier colony. "You're really big," she said, taking a cautious step closer. "Are you some kind of space dog? You have pointy ears, like Rex, the guard dog at the main gate." The creature strained against the tunnel entrance, its claws scraping the concrete as it tried in vain to free itself. Its tail lashed wildly with frustration, but it couldn't find the leverage it needed. "Don't hurt yourself," Lucy said, moving closer. "Getting mad only makes it worse. Daddy taught me that when I got my foot stuck in the mud last year." Vexthar paused, its massive form still. It stared at her, its crimson eyes unblinking. Never in its short, violent existence had any living creature approached it without fear. Every other being it had encountered had either fled or attacked. This small human was doing neither. "You have really pretty eyes," Lucy continued, now standing just 10 feet away from the galaxy's most feared weapon. "They're red, like the sunset, but you look sad. Are you sad because you're stuck?" The creature's cybernetic implants whirred as they processed the strange interaction. There was no aggression, no fear, only genuine concern. It was so foreign to Vexthar's programming that the creature's implants flickered in confusion. Lucy sat cross-legged on the broken concrete, still clutching her stuffed dog. "My mommy says that when you're upset, it helps to sit quietly and think about happy things. Want to try that?" Her voice was gentle and patient, just as she spoke to her animals at home. She told the creature about her stuffed dog, about her daddy's work, and about the pretty flowers that grew near their house. The creature that had decimated entire military units now listened to a child's innocent chatter, as if captivated by something entirely new. Deep within its genetically modified brain, ancient instincts, ones the Krillians had hoped to erase forever, began to awaken. "You know what?" Lucy said, looking directly into the creature's burning red eyes. "I think you're not really mean at all. I think you're just scared and far from home. That must be really lonely." For the first time since its creation, Vexthar felt something other than rage or hunger. The sensation was so foreign, so strange, that it stopped struggling entirely. Down in the shelter, the horrifying sounds of Vexthar's advance, the scraping, the growling, ceased abruptly. An eerie silence filled the tunnels, replacing the constant chaos with an unsettling stillness. "What's happening up there?" someone whispered. No one knew that. Far above them, a little girl was sitting in the ruined plaza, speaking softly to their worst nightmare, as if it were a lost puppy in need of friend. Lucy Bennett remained seated on the broken concrete, speaking gently to the immense creature wedged in the tunnel entrance. Vexthar had ceased its thrashing, Its immense head turned toward her with an expression that almost seemed curious. "You have really nice fur," Lucy said, even though the creature's body was covered in thick, armored scales. "It's so shiny and black. I bet someone takes good care of you." Vexthar's cybernetic implants flickered as they tried to process this unexpected interaction. Its enhanced sensors scanned the girl, its brain working overtime to understand what was happening, but none of its calculations could explain the calm, innocent conversation before it. "Are you hungry?" Lucy asked, reaching into her small backpack. "I have some crackers from lunch. Mommy always packs extra food for me." She pulled out a small package of cheese crackers, opening it carefully. The simple action caused Vexthar to tense slightly. Its programming flared with warnings, alerts about potential traps or weapons. But Lucy merely picked out one cracker and held it out toward the creature. "Here, try this. It's really good. My daddy brings these special ones from the supply ship." Vexthar's sharp eyes fixed on the tiny piece of food in the child's hand. It analyzed it with precision. No poison, no explosives, no hidden dangers. Just a simple cracker, smelling faintly of cheese and wheat. "It's okay," Lucy continued, moving a little closer. "I know you're probably not supposed to take food from strangers, but we're friends now, right? Friends share snacks." The creature's massive head slowly lowered until its glowing red eyes were level with Lucy's face. "Up close," she said with genuine wonder. "Your eyes are even prettier. They're like little pieces of gold in the sunset." Her voice was soft and filled with admiration. Down in the shelter, the silence above was beginning to raise concern. Captain Morrison had managed to crawl to a working radio, weakly trying to contact anyone still alive on the surface. "This is Morrison to any surviving units. What's the status on the creature?" "Over." Static was all he received in return. Everyone who might have responded was either dead or hiding. Kate Bennett, desperate with worry, continued to search the tunnels for Lucy. "Lucy, baby, please answer me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Where are you?" Dr. Cross had managed to get closer to the shelter entrance, hoping to gain insight into what was happening. What he found only deepened his confusion. The creature was still there, but it wasn't moving. It seemed focused. Its massive form appeared to be waiting for something, its gaze fixed on something beyond the tunnel. "That's impossible," Dr. Cross muttered to himself, recording the observation in disbelief. "Its behavioral patterns show it should be actively hunting. Instead, it appears to be waiting for something." On the surface, Lucy was still trying to feed Vexthar the cracker. The creature hadn't taken it yet, but neither had it moved away. Its nostrils flared as it took in the simple scent of the food. "You don't have to eat it if you don't want to," Lucy said patiently. "Sometimes animals have special diets." She placed the cracker on the ground between them and scooted back a little. "There, you can have it when you're ready." Vexthar's glowing red eyes remained fixed on the small offering. Something deep in its enhanced mind was stirring. A faint, primal memory passed through its consciousness, a memory of pack animals, of shared meals. The thought was fleeting but powerful. Lucy yawned and rubbed her eyes, the weight of the day's terror finally catching up with her. "I'm getting sleepy," she said, her voice softening. "Are you tired too?" "You look tired." The creature did indeed look exhausted. Its cybernetic implants had been working nonstop, processing battle data and tactical information. The strain was beginning to show. "When I'm tired, Mommy says I should rest," Lucy continued, as if speaking to a familiar friend. "But you're still stuck in that hole. That must be really uncomfortable." She stood up, walking around the creature to get a different perspective. Vexthar's eyes followed her movements, but it no longer seemed threatening, more like a large dog observing its owner. "I think if you push with your back legs and pull with your front ones at the same time, you might get unstuck," Lucy suggested. "That's how Daddy got the tractor out of the mud last month." Vexthar tilted its massive head, considering her words. The child's simple logic made sense. It had been trying to force its way out using only brute strength, but perhaps a different approach was required. The creature adjusted its position and, following Lucy's advice, began to push and pull in tandem. Vexthar's powerful hind legs pushed against the ground, while its front claws dug into the tunnel's edges. Slowly, inch by inch, the creature began to free itself from the trap it had been stuck in for over an hour. "That's it," Lucy cheered, clapping her small hands. "You're doing great. Just a little more." With a final, Herculean heave, Vexthar pulled itself completely out of the tunnel entrance. The massive creature, which had been trapped for so long, was finally free. It stood to its full 12-foot height and looked down at the little girl who had helped it. Lucy smiled up at the beast with a proud grin. "See? I told you it would work. Daddy's really smart about getting things unstuck." For the first time in its existence, Vexthar felt something akin to gratitude. The emotion was so foreign to its programming that its cybernetic systems briefly shut down to reboot, as if trying to comprehend this unfamiliar feeling. "You're really big when you stand up," Lucy observed, her eyes wide in wonder. "Do you live around here? I don't remember seeing you before, and I know most of the animals in the colony." Vexthar looked around at the destruction it had wrought. The buildings lay in ruins, vehicles were destroyed, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke and fear. All of this, everything around them, was its doing. But the small human child showed no fear, no anger, no hatred. She looked at the creature with the same kindness she might show to an animal in need of help. "Are you sad about something?" Lucy asked, noticing the subtle change in the creature's posture. "You look like you feel bad. Did someone hurt your feelings?" Vexthar's enhanced hearing picked up the sounds coming from the underground shelter. People were crying. Children were frightened. Families were scattered, torn apart by the terror the creature had brought. "It's okay to feel sad sometimes," Lucy said softly, her voice full of innocence. "Everyone gets sad, even big, strong animals like you." She walked closer to the creature, reaching up with her tiny hand toward its armored leg. "Sometimes when I'm sad, a hug makes me feel better," Lucy added with gentle concern, "but you're too big for me to hug properly." Instead, she gave the creature's massive leg a soft pat, the gesture simple and pure. Something inside Vexthar's modified brain shifted. Pack behavior, comfort gestures, social bonding. All the instincts the Krillians thought they had erased flooded back in a rush of genetic memory. "You know what?" Lucy said, looking up at those burning red eyes. "I think you're not a mean animal at all. I think maybe you just don't know how to be nice because no one ever taught you." She sat down on the broken concrete again, patting the ground beside her. "Want to sit with me for a while? Sometimes it helps to just sit quietly with a friend." Vexthar's red eyes fixed on the spot where Lucy had patted the ground. The simple invitation, so pure and unassuming, confused every tactical system in its enhanced brain. Sit. Such a basic command. But coming from this child, it felt less like an order and more like a gentle request. "Come on," Lucy encouraged with a warm smile. "Sit." The word hung in the air between them, one single, simple syllable that would alter the course of galactic history. Vexthar glanced between the child and the spot she had indicated. Then, for the first time since its creation, the galaxy's most feared bioweapon felt the urge to obey. Not out of programming, not out of fear, but because of something that felt almost like affection. Slowly, carefully, the creature lowered its massive body to the ground and sat beside the little girl, just as she had asked. Lucy Bennett sat next to the beast in the ruins of New Haven's Central Plaza. Vexthar had actually listened to her. It sat quietly beside her, its immense body casting a shadow that enveloped them both. "See? That's much better," Lucy said, patting the creature's armored leg once more. "Now we can be proper friends." Vexthar's red eyes looked down at her with something entirely new, something that had never existed there before. The cybernetic implants that had been designed to make it the perfect killer were now processing emotions they were never programmed to handle. Dr. Cross watched from his hidden vantage point, unable to believe what he was seeing. The creature that had torn through an entire military force was now sitting calmly beside a child, as if it were a domesticated animal. "This is impossible," he whispered into his recorder. The behavioral modification should have made this creature incapable of peaceful interaction. Yet here it is, responding to a child's voice like a trained pet. Back in the underground shelter, the silence from above was becoming more noticeable. Some of the braver colonists, uncertain of what had happened, began to inch closer to the entrance. The terrible sounds of destruction had stopped completely, and they wondered if the monster had finally left. Captain Morrison, despite his injuries, managed to stand. He limped toward the entrance tunnel, clutching his broken rifle, though he knew it was useless against the creature. "Stay back," he warned the civilians who followed. It might be a trap, but as Morrison neared the entrance, he heard something that made no sense at all. A child's voice, calm and happy, speaking as if nothing had happened. And then, a strange rumbling sound, like the purring of a giant cat. On the surface, Lucy had found a piece of rubble that was smooth and round. "Look, I found a ball," she said, showing to Vexthar. "Do you want to play catch?" The creature tilted its enormous head, watching the small object with interest. Its enhanced eyes automatically tracked the ball's movement as Lucy rolled it across the plaza. "Go get it," she encouraged, her voice filled with excitement. "Bring it back here," Lucy encouraged, her voice filled with excitement. Vexthar looked at the ball, then at Lucy, then back at the ball. Something deep within its genetic memory stirred. The concept of pack hunting, of play, of social bonding through shared activities. All the instincts the Krillians had hoped to bury were slowly reawakening. With slow deliberation, the creature stood up and walked over to where the concrete ball had rolled. Its massive jaws opened with careful precision, picking up the ball without crushing it. Then it walked back to Lucy and gently placed the ball at her feet. "Good boy," Lucy said, clapping her hands with delight. "You're really smart. Want to try again?" This time, she threw the ball farther across the plaza. Vexthar watched as it bounced, its eyes tracking the motion before looking back at Lucy's expectant face. For reasons it couldn't fully process, the child's happiness felt important to it now. Her smile, her joy. Nothing had ever felt more rewarding than seeing her happy. The creature retrieved the ball again, and this time there was something almost resembling enthusiasm in its movements. Its spiked tail, which had once been a weapon of terror, now swayed gently behind it, like the wagging tail of a dog. Kate Bennett, breathless and frantic, finally reached the tunnel entrance where Captain Morrison was standing. She pushed past him, running toward the surface with every ounce of energy she had left. "Lucy," she called out desperately, her voice cracking. "Lucy, where are you?" Then she saw them. Her 8-year-old daughter, sitting in the middle of the ruined town square, playing fetch with the galaxy's most feared bioweapon. Kate's legs went weak, and she had to grab onto a piece of rubble to keep herself from falling. "Mommy," Lucy called out cheerfully. "Come meet my new friend. He was stuck, but I helped him get out. And look how good he is at playing catch." Vexthar turned its glowing red eyes toward Kate. For a moment, she froze in terror, certain that death would come for both her and her child. But the creature simply regarded her with calm interest before turning back to Lucy, as though waiting for the next round of the game. "That's my mommy," Lucy explained, pointing to Kate with a smile. "She's really nice. She teaches me about taking care of animals." Dr. Cross, still hidden in the shadows, cautiously emerged from his hiding spot. His hand was shaking as he approached the impossible scene. Other colonists began to gather, their faces filled with disbelief, staring at the creature, once a terrifying monster, now sitting peacefully beside a little girl. "Ow!" Captain Morrison asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "How'd you do this?" Dr. Cross knelt down, his eyes scanning the creature with growing fascination. Its cybernetic implants were still active, but now they were processing a completely different kind of data. Instead of tactical analysis or target identification, they seemed to be focused on the child's emotional state and well-being. "She didn't see a weapon," Cross said in awe. "She saw an animal, and she treated it like one." Lucy stood up and brushed the dust from her clothes. "He's not scary at all," she told the gathered adults, her voice full of quiet certainty. "He was just confused and far from home. Animals act mean when they're scared, but they're really just looking for someone to be nice to them." Vexthar's massive head lowered until it was nearly at Lucy's level. She reached out and gently stroked the side of its face, right where dogs like to be petted. Vexthar's eyes closed in a deep, contented rumble. The closest thing to a purr vibrated through its body. See, Lucy said to her mother, he likes being petted. I think he's been lonely for a really long time. The news of what happened at New Haven spread faster than any military report ever could. Within hours, every colony and ship in the sector knew that a child had tamed the Krillian Empire's ultimate weapon with nothing but kindness. The Krillian High Command's reaction was swift and desperate. Emergency orders went out to all bioweapon facilities. Recall every Vexthar unit immediately, they instructed. The creatures that were supposed to be our greatest advantage have become our worst nightmare. On Krill Prime, military scientists worked frantically to understand how their perfect killing machines have been turned against them by a simple human child. The genetic base is flawed, one scientist reported. We used pack predator DNA, but we underestimated the social bonding instincts. The human child triggered responses we thought we had eliminated. The Krillian Emperor himself watched the security footage from New Haven with growing horror. Their entire war strategy had been built on the fear these creatures instilled. Now, that fear had been replaced by something far more dangerous: hope. Recall all bioweapon units, the Emperor ordered. Destroy the research facilities. We cannot allow this information to spread to other human colonies. But it was too late. The story of Lucy Bennett and her gentle treatment of the galaxy's most feared creature had already become legend. Human colonies everywhere began to see the Krillian bioweapons not as unstoppable monsters, but as confused animals that could be reached with patience and kindness. 3 months later, Lucy was playing in her family's new garden. New Haven had been rebuilt, stronger, more beautiful than ever before. Next to her, a massive black creature lay in the sunshine, its cybernetic implants now used only to monitor its health and happiness. Rex, Lucy called, using the name she had given her new friend. Come help me plant these flowers. The creature that had once been called Vexthar opened its red eyes and looked at the small girl with pure devotion. It had found something the Krillians never intended to give it: a purpose beyond destruction, a reason to protect instead of destroy. Lucy had shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or tactics. It was their ability to see potential friends where others saw only enemies, to offer kindness where others offered only fear. And in doing so, she had changed the course of a war that had once seemed impossible to win.